Yes, guys, welcome back to the Irish Hotspur with your boy Dave. And of course, it is your favorite show of the week. We have brought the one and only Sean over from Spurs Talk Show. We want to see how he is before we get into today's talking points. Shawnee, how are you keeping, my man?
Good, Dave, mate. I'm good. Yeah, yesterday I was absolutely shattered from the weekend's exploits, but I feel fully refreshed, fully recharged, and I'm all about Tottenham again, mate. It's great to be back with you. Great to be back with the Flat Cap Army and the Harris Army. So, yeah, appreciate you all for having me. And, yeah, let's talk Tottenham.
It's great to have you back, my man. Great to have you back. And I'm delighted, you got to go to the Arsenal game as well. Just before I want to ask you something just a little quickly on that. I want to say a massive thank you to everybody out there who is tuning into this show. Some good numbers on it. All the comments in underneath really does mean a lot. And keep that going. Keep the love going. Keep the likes. Keep the comments going in underneath. And anything else you want to see myself and Sean address in future shows, put it in underneath. And we will bring it up and we'll have a good conversation on it. But Shawnee, of course, you got to go away to the North London Derby. Is it as good a day out as you would expect it to be?
Yeah, it was a weird one, mate. I travelled by myself. The travel there was fine, and I walked down the Holloway Road and walked into a bunch of pubs that were obviously Arsenal dominated. And I got lots of footage. I got lots of footage on my camera. I was intending to do a vlog, but stupidly I had a setting wrong on my camera, so none of it really captured the way it needed to be captured. But I want to actually say a genuine shout out to those guys. If you happen to be watching, that were Arsenal fans. I walked into every pub and let them know I'm a Tottenham guy. Run a YouTube channel. Can I get some pre-match thoughts, expectations? Everyone was super cool. One even bought me a beer. There was no nastiness or anything like that. Went into the ground. I've got to be honest. The stadium isn't, or at least the away section. If you're behind the goal, it's a decent 15 meters from the goal line to the start of the kind of the seating, and then the incline's pretty shallow. So it wasn't easy to see the game when it was on the halfway line or in the other half. So yeah, I wasn't that impressed with the stadium. The Tottenham fans were incredible. The Arsenal fans were really impressive as well, to be fair. When they had the supremacy for moments. It was a great day, great experience. Not sure I would pay the money that I paid to go back again, if I'm honest. But you know what? It's a box ticking exercise, bucket list thing. Yeah, and fair play. It was like I say, the Arsenal fans were very cool when I met them. So I'm sure I didn't meet too many of them after the game. Maybe they would have been different.
Well, they were very quickly out of there, Sean. Arsenal fans, they like to leave early. We've seen pictures of that. They like to get out of there nice and early. Apparently, the better things to be doing. But, it is, thank you for letting me know. So if I ever do go away to the Emirates, I need to get my West Ham starter pack out and I need to bring that with me. Yeah, the binoculars, probably a telescope, the whole shebang, Shawnee. Genuinely, my man. Just everyone knows my thoughts, so I'm not even going to comment on it. But what's your thoughts on the result from the North London Derby before we move on to other topics?
Do you know what, mate? I've spent a long time this last 48 hours catching up with people on various streams, Arsenal fans, neutral fans that were giving us zero chance. I've been sort of pulling in some receipts and putting some people in the mud because no one gave us any chance. I always thought we had a chance. Look, I'll acknowledge that Arsenal obviously have got some injury issues. And of course that does affect things, but it's always a thing that people only ever reflect on when it affects them and their team, and no one ever gives it credit when it affects the opposition. I'll give it the credit it's due, but I wasn't that impressed with Arsenal. I really don't think they're the same team that they think they are, or the fans think they are. I think last year was not the new normal for them. I think that was the exception, and I think gravity's pulling them back down to earth. And I think that Arsenal fans need to prepare themselves not for a title race, but for a Champions League spot race, because there's 4 or 5 teams that I think are just as good as, if not maybe marginally better than them, that are in that kind of top 4, top 5 conversation. And so I don't think that they have really recognized what their ambitions should be this year, or what their outcomes will likely look like. In terms of the game itself, I think it could have gone either way. Of course, Tottenham traditionally start slow. And of course, as has been the case a couple of times this season, if the opposition takes their chances early doors, then it's a different outcome, or maybe it's a different game at least. But we go 1-0 down, we never say die, and we were all in and fully valued the point. I think if any team deserved the win, it was Tottenham. But I'd say a point was probably the fair result on reflection. But I think the referee played too much of an impact, had too much of an impact in the game. And those 50-50s always go the way of the opposition. And if those things don't happen, then I think Tottenham go on to win the game, quite completely. So I'll take the draw, but I didn't celebrate the draw, I'll be honest. And I don't think any of the people in the fans that were next to me in the stands celebrated it. We all walked away thinking, well, we're relieved we didn't lose, but actually they're not that great. We could have probably got the win there on a different day.
Do you know what? We were doing the watch round course, and I think I've seen similar comments, right? People going, look, I'll take the result, but I just feel maybe we left the win behind us. Look, I can understand that. For me, I did celebrate the draw. You know me, I love rubbing it in. I get a lot of heat around these North London derbies. So when we don't get beaten, I can just give it large. So, but the officiating, for me, they're having way too much impact on the games of football. You look at football clubs, usually they spend millions of pounds on something to improve it. You see that improvement. We've spent, football has spent so much money on bringing in a fail-safe 4 referees in terms of VAR and the technology. But yeah, it's more prevalent than ever, and it's officiating and the technology that they're using is becoming the talking points of the weekend rather than the actual football that's on display. And I've absolutely had enough of it. The officiating is a joke. And the guy that's appointed for this weekend's game, he was the guy that, gave some dodgy decisions at the back end of last season against Southampton where they had a late comeback. So, look, we'll see how the referee does this weekend. Hopefully we're not talking about another guy on the brown envelope. But look, Shawnee, that brings me on to the next point. We talk about a lot of the players, right? Madison, the Doji, a lot of these new signings that we've made, they're taking the plaudits, and rightly so. But for me, I would argue that Ange Postecoglou is the most important signing Tottenham have actually made, because you look at the first team, unbeaten start to the season, under 21s, unbeaten start to the season. The fans are believing. The fans are loud and proud where they haven't been in years gone by. And I feel like that's had a bigger impact than any signing will this season on the pitch.
I couldn't agree more, mate. A lot of the players that we signed that are playing well this season were signed for his system. Bissouma was signed under Conte, the previous model, the way we played football before. Pape Sarr, Destiny Udogie, Pedro Porro, all of those guys were not necessarily bought to play in the current model. And I've always been a proponent of this idea of that sometimes you struggle with transitions because you sign players on 4 or 5 year deals, but the managers have a shelf life on average in the Premier League over the last 20 years of 18 months. And in the last 3 or 4 years, it's been a lot shorter than that. And obviously with Tottenham specifically, we haven't had a manager last more than a season for a long time. And so you're constantly battling with this pivot from feast to famine in the style of football, from the structure, the formation, the tactics. And we've gone out and signed and spent a lot of money on players that do not necessarily fit that system. And you've heard me say square pegs for round holes to the point where I'm sick of saying it. And Ange Postecoglou has come in, and I will hold my hands up. I said a long time ago, the first guy, whoever the next managerial cab off the rank is, when we finally pivot to a system that is front foot football and an attractive football first, that manager will probably fail because he's going to have to inherit a bunch of players that don't fit his system. And it's only when you get through that particular quagmire, then you're going to, if you stick to the system, you're then going to be able to start to find efficiencies in your procurement and figure it out. But Ange Postecoglou's come in and taken Pedro Porro and turned him into a right back.
Yeah.
Like so quickly. He's taken Destiny Udogie, who's a left wing back, and turned him into the best left back in the Premier League, in my opinion, right now. On form, no one challenges him, in my opinion. He's taken Bissouma, who was an unused gemstone. Conte saw him as a piece of coal, and Postecoglou's turned him into a diamond in the rough. We brought in a couple of players to help out, like Madison here and that, but Kulusevski's thriving, Sonny moving into the middle. So for me, 100%, mate, I couldn't agree more that the way that we are playing now, the style, the system, and the form and the results, anyone who's not giving credit to Ange Postecoglou, and I'd be surprised how many people aren't, but for me, Ange Postecoglou is the keystone. He is the cornerstone, not just his formation and his tactics, but the way that he answers questions, the way that he gives people the license to make mistakes and say, I'm not going to criticize you if you make the mistake. I'll only criticize you if you change your output, change your directive because you made a mistake. You stick to the plan, Batman. And people like Van der Ven have come out and said it. It's enlightening for them, and everyone loves it. Everyone's on board it. So I 100% agree, mate, that Ange Postecoglou has been Tottenham's best signing this season.
Look, I completely agree. It's just the way he's completely transformed this football club. If you would have said to me, you know, even when he was first appointed, you know, would this, where we're at now, would this be the case? You know, 7 games into the season, I would have said, no way. You're absolutely deluded. You know, you're more deluded than Mr. Box Office. But, you know, what the job he's done to be able to turn players around who maybe were looking one eye on leaving the football club, have been here for a couple of years, haven't seen the progression, you know, I've constantly been ridiculed and this, that, and the other. The way he's come in, put an arm around everybody and said, look, it's different now. You know, yes, you've been ridiculed for making mistakes, but now I actually want you to make mistakes so you can get a grasp of the system and the way I want to play so you can adapt to it. And by doing that, you will start eliminating the errors that you were making. So I think, you know, he's done an absolute massive job in terms of player confidence, throwing an arm around people. The job he done with Bissouma, you know, he's night and day. The personality is night and day. The smile is night and day. You know, the job he's done with him is absolutely phenomenal. To be able to ring Maddison and get him on the blower, to be able to convince him that Tottenham is where his future lies going forward, when, look, there would have been other suitors out there for him. I think he's done a magnificent job in that. To get a system where all them under 21 players were looking at leaving, all of a sudden tied down. We've got a bright future ahead there. They're unbeaten. You know, we've heard previous managers out in the club, out in press conference, like you said, Sean, he speaks so well. We've heard managers out there before telling fans not to get carried away, to dampen your expectations, you know, talking about the lack of quality we have compared to other teams, which I agreed with to a certain extent. You know, that about the quality, and that has improved under Ange with some of the signings and being able to get all the players out. But the way he tells fans, it's up to you to expect, it's up to us to match it on the pitch. And we had a conversation last week about that, Shawnee, and you're like, well, look, he's letting the cat out of the bag now, right? He's sort of letting the expectations run away. He's got a big job to live up to it, and to come out of the Emirates unscathed, I think he is starting to maybe live up to that a little. And what I see in and around with some of the words coming out, the confidence going into North London Derby from some of the players and all that, Shawnee, I think they believe, with 1 game a week, I think they believe they have a shot at winning the title. I genuinely believe that behind the doors, that's what they're thinking.
You know what? So I 100% agree with you, everything you just said. And I did say, and I stand by it, that if you are going to give Tottenham fans an inch with expectations, they will take a mile, right? And it's fine. It is what it is. And I love it. But I also know that, like I said before, when I did, you know, when I was first responded to it, obviously there's always that kind of elephant in the room, which is you're an injury or two away from really being challenged. I think our first 11 can compete with anyone else's first 11 on their day, especially playing this football with the confidence that he's instilled. But when you see a couple of players come off the pitch injured, like we did against Arsenal, I think we lost the attacking impetus. But I think that's just first season syndrome. I think that Rome wasn't built in a day. And I think I would urge everybody, as much as I am so tempted, and I mentioned it earlier on, I know we just finished recording the live stream with Johnny, I mentioned it that I'm myself who try to stick to logic rather than emotion. I myself am naturally resetting expectations now around what is possible. And I shouldn't be, because I know that we're not there yet with the depth, with the thickness of the squad. However, he is a compelling and engaging and convivial manager that draws you in. And I think he's drawing in the players, and I think he's getting the best juice from the squeeze that he can. And I think the other variable here, I've seen a lot of neutral fans that didn't like the fact that Tottenham got a point away at Arsenal. And I've heard them say, well done, but this is the latest excuse why Tottenham are not going to be able to see it through. And that is because no one knows how to play Tottenham yet. right? It's an early, like the sample, the data size isn't big enough. People aren't prepared. People don't really recognize this double pivot, this kind of double inverted fullback system, and the tactics are unique. And as the sample size grows, smart opposition will figure it out, maybe. And that's a fine variable. It's a fine conversation point, and one we'll probably talk about, Dave, in the future. However, the other variable that is on the same track here is that Tottenham have only been playing this system for 6 weeks. Right. So whilst other teams may or may not have figured us out yet, they haven't figured out a barely crawling version of ourselves. Ange says every week after a good result or a draw or whatever else, he always says, we're just getting started. And so this idea that other teams are going to figure us out when they see more of us, they're not going to see this version of us. We're going to get better and better and better. Injuries aside, we're going to get better. And so for me, what excites me most about Ange is the way that he answers questions, the way that he inspires people, but also leaves room for improvement. He doesn't say that we are the real deal. People like Arteta come out with these arrogant statements about how good they are. Other managers talk about themselves in such high regard. Ange talks about us and suppresses the expectation of what he's done so far and what we're capable of. He's allowing the fans to get excited, but he's also saying, these early days, we still got so much more to come from Tottenham. And that, to me, is the reason why I'm super excited. And again, back to the question, and the answer is, has Ange been the most important signing? 1,000,000%. And anyone, myself included, who doubted him, it's a wonderful thing to be wrong on that one, because I'm so happy we signed him over any of the other guys that we were linked with.
No, for sure, for sure. And look, I think we've got a real good opportunity here as well, Shawnee, right? When we brought Pochettino in at Tottenham, his style of football, Premier League wasn't ready for it, right? And also in and around the Premier League, there were some top clubs with, maybe you would argue, some pragmatic managers. And I think we benefited from that for sure with the style of football. I think we're in a similar situation right now. Yes, you've got Guardiola and Klopp, right? But you look at United, Ten Hag, that football is absolutely shocking. And I think we've got a good opportunity here now. Arteta, I don't like his football. I don't think it's as entertaining. I think the reason why a lot of Arsenal fans left the Emirates Saturday sort of feeling like it was a loss is because I think they're left scratching their head going, well, we spent 750 million in 5 years on Arteta. These guys are 6 games in and they're already more exciting than what we are. And I think the style of football that we play, yes, you might get some teams that will figure it out, but for me, the only way you figure it out is by sitting low block. But then when you sit low block, I'm sure Ange Postecoglou will have other answers for it, and we've got good technical players. We've got players that can score from outside the box. So for me, I think in them games, you just find a way. And I think with the style of football we have a unique opportunity to try and keep Postecoglou here for the next 4 years, build upon it, and really go and try and lift a couple of trophies. Because I think the style of football will take us to where we need to go to get in and around the hunt. But then I think the difference is obviously a bit more recruitment. Don't put it back like we did on the Pochettino. But I think Ange Postecoglou has the mentality and the leadership to be able to lead the team over the line. I think when you look at Tottenham and Pochettino, it was our squad of players and our managers' first time ever getting to where they got to. League title runs, Champions League finals, close in the FA Cup a number of times. And there was when you see Pochettino crying after the Ajax game, for instance, then there's questions about how does he manage manage that whole week, if he's managing it based on emotion rather than, like you say, Sean, rather than logic. Does that affect the outcome? And I think when you look at Ange Postecoglou, he's been there with Celtic and every other clubs he's been at. He knows how to get over the line and handle them sort of big expectations. And I think this time can be the difference. You look at, for instance, Pep Guardiola, how much longer is he going to stay at City after this season? No one really knows. Klopp's already been at Liverpool an awfully long time. How long does he stay there? And I predict with Postecoglou and a 4-year contract, I don't think you will see Klopp and Guardiola still at Liverpool and City come the end of that. And I think then you're in a prime position to go on and really try and achieve something, because you're already ahead of the curve of the likes of Chelsea, Man United, Arsenal, people like that, because we play a great brand of football.
I couldn't agree more with you, mate. And one of the things that you touched on there listen, this might take us on a different tangent from the planned conversation, but I love it. This is what we do, right? Was whether or not Daniel Levy is going to back us when we get to that next stage, whether that stage is January, and if there's no injuries, no significant injuries, does Daniel Levy shy away? Do we wait until the next summer, when really the next season was when most Tottenham fans who are reasonable would have set their expectations that if this works, it's next year, because Rome wasn't built in a day, as we've already spoken about. To me, the question mark will come back on Daniel Levy. And, you know, as someone that defends Daniel Levy against what I perceive to be occasional, not always, but occasional irrational arguments from occasionally found certain members of the fan base, not everybody, I sit there and I usually defend against it. And I'm going to defend against it a little bit now when I talk about what was exposed in the fan forum. It was a very succinct. If you saw the fan forum summary, the minutes, was it the minutes or the whatever it was, but they showed a screenshot of the net spend, or the spend over the last 6 years since the stadium was built. And we basically spent something, I'm paraphrasing, it could be wrong, 830 million quid in spend over the last 6 years. And we took in 250 million quid, something like that. So we had a net spend of £100 million a year on transfers. And we only make on average over the last 5 or 6 years, about 400 million quid in total revenue. So to spend £100 million of the revenue on player transfers equals 25%, give or take. It's going to be some higher, some lower, give or take on the spend. Then when you include the salaries, which is, I think, is, even though it's the lowest wage to turnover ratio in the league, it's still about 48, 47, 49%. So you're around 74, 73% of total revenue that the club makes throughout all the different things that we do is spent on player salaries and player transfers. To me, if we are going to be a self-sustainable club, which is what Daniel Levy said we're going to be, then if there's no more money coming from injections of capital from Joe Lewis or from the trust or whatever else, or from ENIC or anything else, then I don't think we should expect too much more than that money, that £100 million net being spent, unless we can improve on our ability to regather money from player sales, where we've failed miserably over the last 5 or 6 years. To me, the question mark, sorry to give that kind of background to my comment here, but to me, the question mark is whether or not Daniel Levy is going to take us to that next level. Does the juice equal, is the juice worth the squeeze to him, to Club Tottenham Hotspur? That's the question mark that Levy outers have. Whenever we've got to a place where we can almost kick on, we haven't, right? And is it because that the differential in the money that's made from winning the Premier League is not that different to finishing third or fourth or second, right? And if so, does Daniel Levy want to give us the necessary means to take us further? And if he's not prepared to put his money in his hand in his pocket again, then can we do it anyway via the new FFP rules that are coming in over the next 2 years that will finish with 70% of 70% of your revenues being spent on the things like wages and salaries and agents' fees, which we're already there or thereabouts anyway. And so to me, the massive question mark is if Daniel Levy, if Ange Postecoglou is the guy who can take us there, when we need it, when we need that extra bit of money, will Daniel Levy put his hand in his pocket, or will he stick to the sustainable model? And if the sustainable model is the make ends meet thing, then do we have access to the capital that we need to be able to go and buy the things that we need to be able to get to that next level? And if we don't, then all of this is a muchness, because I think that we are on the cusp. I agree with you, Dave, that with Klopp, running out of natural tenure, not many managers last as long as he has. With Guardiola probably looking for another challenge, there is an opportunity. It's whether Daniel Levy and ENIC and the ownership want to get us there. And that, to me, is how that figures itself out is going to be the key to everything.
Well, look, we had a conversation before. I can't remember if it was last week or the week before. And look, fuck the rest of the script. We're going off where this is a good conversation. I'm enjoying this. You know, this is what we do, Sean. We pivot. We're like in that midfield for Ange Postecoglou. But look, we've had conversations before, my man, right, about did all of that before under Pochettino come too soon? You know, I spoke about Pochettino's first time ever getting there, along with the squad of players. We spoke about the infrastructure behind the scenes in terms of the guys, the right guys for recruitment, scouting, etc., etc. None of it was there. It was sort of like we had, you know, we had all the infrastructure, but we didn't have all the right components behind it to be able to sustain what we were doing alongside the infrastructure. I'd argue now we have actually, or we're starting to at least get a lot of it in place, and we're starting to see the benefit of it. So I do think that there's an element that with the smarter recruitment and stuff like that, and not pulling back like we had done under Pochettino for 3 transfer windows, I think that'll ultimately help, you know, catapult you a bit further towards it. However, it will need at some point Daniel Levy to look at things and go, I'm going to take a gamble here. It's going to have to happen at some point where he might have to spend a bit more than what he wants. Is he going to do that as a trained accountant? Well, they're taught not to go against the numbers. So I'm not so sure on that. But look, no surprise to me that he had an interview on Bloomberg, one of the biggest business channels out there, talking about investment. First time
25%. Yeah.
And Shawnee, you're right. In the fans forum meeting, it was the first time as well, you know, that we've ever really sort of ever heard him openly talk about, you know, the option of investment coming into the club, even how, you know, even with them maybe considering if something comes in, the fact that you mentioned we have a due diligence to consider it. Very, very interesting. For me, maybe when you hear the reports about Jam the Jaffe, all them people in times gone by, is there room for someone to come in and get that investment? And that's how we kick on? Or there's another way, Sean. You look at Man City, over the last couple of years, they've earned over, I think 100, 200 million in terms of academy players. Are they already trying to get ahead of the financial fair play rules coming by generating that money from the academy, which adds to your transfer budget and can increase your overall spend? Because that's somewhere where Tottenham have failed in the past. We've let a lot of players go for free. Madueke comes back into the Premier League for what, 40, 50 million. If we would have been able to sell them, that's 40, 50 million to our coffers, which means we can do a little bit more. So off what I've said there, Sean, where are you at with it?
Yeah, mate, again, great points. Right? To me, that this is the key question around Daniel Levy's tenure. I personally, I'll sit there and I'll say it. I've said it before. I'll say it with chest. I do not think he is anything like as bad a chairman as some people think he is. You know why? I come from a different angle. I think he is ahead of the curve by a mile, by 5, 6, 7 years over other chairmen that are only now, as you see it, Arsenal are trying to figure out ways to monetize their stadium. Chelsea are trying to build a new stadium, but it's going to cost them 4 times as much as what they first thought. Our stadium cost twice as much because of a commodities boom that happened to be bad timing. But you know what? Chelsea had to delay their entire stadium rebuild because of the crisis in the inflation market that happened a couple of years ago that's still going on. You see other teams. Everton are moving to a new stadium. They're trying to find ways to add revenue streams. Everybody is looking at Daniel Levy's model and saying this is a way to find other additional revenue streams that doesn't put the pressure on always the same fans. And I think that Daniel Levy needs some credit for that. What I think, where I think the rubber meets the road is his risk appetite. To your point, Dave, is he going to take a little bit of risk that is maybe in his mind unnecessary risk? And it depends on his ambition. If he wants to just stay competitive in the Champions League, then so be it. He probably won't, because to him, it might come down to dollars and cents. But if he's talking about it from a fan perspective, or if he's trying to include that kind of fan obligation, and he's trying to represent himself, he's been more vocal and more visible in the last 2 months than he's ever been. He's making out like we have ambition. If we do, then at some point, it's not just about the ways that you make money. It's sometimes about when you make money, how much money you've made, and can you kick the can down the road to a degree like Chelsea are doing, where they have creative accounting policies and practices that can make them stay within FFP guidelines, but still take a little bit of risk. I'm not asking Daniel Levy to get some benefactor to pop in $1 billion. I don't personally agree with that policy, and I don't think it's worked for most of the clubs. I think there's other things other ways that you can find efficiencies. Manchester City have done it with the multi-club ownership. I personally believe that Scott Munn is in place for that in the future. Not yet. That will be something we'll see in 3 or 4 years' time when the time is right. But I genuinely believe that how we kick on is whether or not Daniel Levy loosens his mental purse strings on access to risk. If he can find the rationale to take on some extensive or excessive risk in individual circumstances to bring in the player and get it right, the acquisition of the player ID, the talent ID needs to be right in order to make ends meet in terms of the football results, then I think we can do it. And the way that you can do that, the way that it's easier to do that is if you know, back to your point, Dave, that you have players through the youth system that whether they make it into the first team or otherwise, that you can, if you see the talent, even if they're not ready for Tottenham and they themselves want to go, you liquidate the asset at the price point now, but you attach to it 50% sell-on clauses, similar to Marcus Edwards, but on a higher frequency. Or that you bring them in and that you bring them into the first team to the point where they themselves elevate their own asset value. You look at Vicario. We bought Vicario for £15 million. There's no chance in a million years is he only worth £15 million now. That guy started
on negotiating that one.
What's that say again?
Who had the balaclava on negotiating that one?
100%, right? Exactly. Yeah. Who had the kind of the gun in his coat pocket, right? Like Vicario, absolute steal at 15 million. Madison, absolute steal at 35. Let's go back a year. Bissouma, absolute steal as a crime, 25 million. The only bigger crime than paying 25 million for Bissouma was the fact that he wasn't used by Conte. And that sits on Conte's head. I know you're a Conte fan, so, you know, but look at Pape Sarr, 10 million quid for him. How much is he worth right now? 40 million, 35 million, 40 million. He's only getting better. Destiny Udogie, how much do we pay for him? 15 million quid? Is he not the best left back in the Premier League right now?
100 million now. Easy.
Right. So, and you look at Manor Solomon. People were saying, oh, it's just a typical Levy deal. You get him on a free transfer so that Manor Solomon's done really well. All I'm saying is that if you can find ways to elevate the asset value of the squad, then you not only can have a little bit more appetite for risk, even if you're not the sort of person that naturally has the appetite for risk, and Daniel Levy doesn't. But all of these things put us in a really good stead that when the time comes and the youth isn't ready, maybe it's in January, maybe it's next summer, we know that we can go bigger on a player where the inflation in the market is what it is, but we go for it because we know we can make ends meet if we absolutely have to by liquidating somebody else that's come in for this much but is actually worth that much. And again, back to the very first question, the reason why this whole thing is working out so well so far is because Ange Postecoglou has the trust in youth and knows when to utilize and use these players in the way that best benefits the football club, the football team, and the overall ecosystem that we're trying to build. And for me, I think it's sort of turning into a wonderful bubble that is just a beautiful thing to see.
You mark my words, by the end of this season, it's a bubble most football fans will want to be in, and they'll be talking about how do we implement that at our football club. But look, we've come full circle with the conversation, so I think we will leave it there. I really enjoyed that conversation. That was an absolute belter. And the last thing I will say on it, Shawnee, I think with everything we spoke about there sort of being in place and all the right teams in place, back to, like you said, full circle, we've got the right man to lead it, the right front man to answer the questions about it in the press, this, that, and the other. So I think, look, very, very exciting times ahead. But Shawnee, tell people, you know, what they need to go over and check out on the channel, my man.
Yeah, Spurs Talk Show. You know, if you don't know me by now, then I'm obviously on the Irish Hotspur every week. And on my channel, I do daily walks with my dog. I do fan cams from the stadium if I'm at the games. I do watch-alongs if I'm not. And I do, you know, pop-up shows with Dave and Johnny and a few other people throughout the week. I've got a show on a Wednesday with George. We just started. So there's a lot of content over at the Spurs Talk Show where you can find me. And hopefully you'll find some of it interesting. Spurs Talk Show on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
That show with George there the other day was actually very good with yourself and George. It was a great listen. Everybody, please do get over there and check out Spurs Talk Show. There's always one who doesn't know who someone is. So make sure you get over there, check it out, and you will not be disappointed. Do what 18,000 others as known. By the way, congratulations, my man, on the 18K. Absolutely smashing it. And get over there and smash that subscribe button. That's it from us. Get your comments and your thoughts in below. As usual, your boy will be in there interacting with you. Anything you want to see maybe from this conversation continued on next week, let us know in the comment section.
We had like 5 or 6 different questions that we decided to walk away from because Dave and I just happened to flow.
Do you know what? This always sort of happens. We sit there, right, what we're going to talk about. We come up with things, and then, you know, conversation pivots. But I absolutely love it. I wouldn't change it for the world. That's why, you know, I asked you to do this with me, and that's why I enjoy it, Sean. Love
100%,
it.
buddy.
Love it.
100%.
Everyone, you know, the rest of the week, there's plenty more content coming out over here, and we'll see you all soon. As always, come on, you Spurs. In the big Ange we trust.
We never stop.
Adios, amigos.